Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the City and Guilds employer community. And today's event is all about leadership development stories. We're going to be here for around an hour. We're going to have a little bit of input from City and Guilds. We've got some great panelists lined up for later, and there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions and comments. We really want to hear your stories and your comments as well. If you want to post any questions as we're going, please use the comment function on Zoom. So you can post those and we'll get to them in the section at the end, or you can potentially ask them live at the end as well. So please do any questions for myself, my colleague, or any of our panelists relating to this topic of leadership development. If you'd just like to have your cameras off and make sure you're on mute for this section, obviously there'll be a Q&A later where we'll invite people to turn cameras on. But for now, just so we can keep the flow going, it'd be better to leave yourselves on mute. My name's Joe Bell. I'm one of the skills specialists at City and Guilds. I work in a team with Sarah Turner and Gemma Edwards, and the three of us work with employers, so learning and development leaders and training managers within large employers and medium-sized employers, talking about any kind of skills challenges and offering kind of end-to-end solutions. I'll talk a little bit about what we do there. We're really happy to be joined today by Paula Gibson, who is our colleague from the Oxford Group, which is part of City and Guilds, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later as well. The agenda today is really straightforward. I'm doing the welcome and intro now. Then we've got Paula talking about the leadership landscape. Then we're going to hear from our fantastic panelists and hear their leadership development stories. Then opportunities for questions from yourselves to our panelists or to us. And then we're going to just do reflections and close. And we aim to close by 12 o'clock. Just a reminder to make sure that you're on mute. I don't think you're automatically muted, so just make sure that people are on mute so there's no background noise. And feel free to have your cameras off for this section, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to hand over to Paula. Paula, if you'd like to introduce yourself and
Yes, thank you, Joe. And thanks for inviting me on here today. I'm really excited to hear from our panelists later on as well. But before we get into that, I just thought I would talk about the leadership landscape and what's evolving and what's changing. My name is Paula Gibson. I'm an account director here at the Oxford Group, which is part of City and Guilds. So I'm delighted to share some key insights that I'm hearing from my global clients right now around how the leadership landscape is evolving. So, I mean, really, as we kind of head into, later on in 2025 and into 2026, we know, and certainly from the conversations I'm having with clients, is that leadership development is undergoing a huge, powerful transformation, with HR leaders saying that leadership development is actually their top priority. But the focus here is sharper than ever. I think while the same challenges remain, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to reimagine how we shape and equip leaders for the future, bearing in mind that Gen Z are becoming our future leaders. It was my daughter's 21st a couple of weeks ago, and she had a party, and I was chatting to one of her friends, a 21-year-old young man, and he was telling me how he's managing a population of 50+ engineers, male engineers in a construction business. And he was talking about some of the challenging conversations he's having around managing their performance. So these challenges are here right now. Also, further compounding to that is recent research is suggesting that only 36% of leadership development programs are considered future ready. And what we mean by that is the majority are not fully preparing leaders for what is rapid changing demands of a modern workplace. Now, this just isn't a statistic. I think it's a signal that many organizations are leaning into outdated models in a world where agility, innovation, and human-centered leadership are critical. And we're going to talk a little bit more about human-centered leadership later on. So what are the top three things that managers are facing increasing pressure? Well, for me, I think it boils down to three key areas. Managers are still navigating hybrid teams. They always will be, but I think this is further compound when you're dealing with global managers and leaders who are managing across multiple time zones, and the pressure and the challenge of keeping that motivation and managing high-performing teams is still a challenge. I think underpinning all of that, we've obviously got the continued global political and economic uncertainty, as well as technological disruption. We know about the recent cyber attacks that we've heard with M&S and the like. So much is happening right now. And even though there's so much focus on AI, we know that AI is transforming the leadership arena. But actually, within that, I think there's an increasing growing expectation that leaders are expected to lead even more with empathy and inclusion. So there's a lot going on. And I think the thing to say is that our leaders of today, they're not just executing plans, they're expected to inspire, adapt, coach, as well as delivering results. And often this is happening all at once in very complex organizations where managers are expected to make really fast decisions in very challenging environments. So we believe there's a call to action here, an opportunity to make leadership development really impactful, really inclusive, and more future focused than ever before. And I think the challenge, it's not just about training, it's about implementing smarter and more inclusive and more transformational development programs. So if we just go on to the next slide, thanks, Joe. I think really what we're talking about here is rethinking leadership development. And according to some recent research by the Harvard Business Review, over half of senior leaders are saying that their programs are not building the right skills. So what we're seeing is a real shift towards development programs that are personalized, tailored, inclusive, and grounded in real world impact. And what we do here at the Oxford Group, when we are implementing leadership programs, we ground them in real life case studies to make them real life and really practical solutions to help leaders navigate their way through these complex situations. This is something that we'll be chatting to our panelists a little bit later on. But what we're saying here is that we need to acknowledge that leadership has to adapt to different needs to reflect cultural backgrounds. We need to help leaders to recognize bias. And this is where AI and algorithms are really starting to challenge that bias conversation and encouraging leaders to lead with empathy. We need leaders to be more self-aware and getting a broad spectrum of feedback from how they're leading teams currently. So what we do here is we do lots of 360 feedback before we go into any leadership development programs to make leaders more self-aware of how they're currently showing up as a leader, and accessible formats that support every manager and leader wherever they are in the world. So we also hear a lot about the role of AI in leadership, and we know it's a game changer. We know that advanced analytical analytics are shaping customized leadership journeys. So things like simulations and real-time feedback is making the learning stick. And I think what is really important here is that our leadership development programs have to lean into behavioral change. So it's not just about knowledge, it's about how our leaders evolving and adapting their behaviors in order to meet their leadership competencies within their organization. And that kind of really leads nicely onto the next slide. Thanks, Joe. Because when we talk about the impact of leadership development, many CEOs are still questioning the return on investment. I know from the conversations that I'm having with my networks and clients is that budgets are shrinking. We know this has been a problem for the last sort of few years now. We've got huge global economic challenges, and fundamentally, most of the training or some of the training isn't always applied to the job. And I'm really excited to hear about this from our panelists later on, because that's something that I'm really interested to hear your experiences on as well, in terms of people hearing this session today. So to shift the dial, experts are saying we need clear metrics, smarter technology, and leadership that is integrated into daily work, not just a one-off event. You can't do 2 days of leadership development training offsite and for this not to be applied in the workplace. This has to be creating a culture of continuous learning where feedback is no longer an option. It really does give you that competitive edge. And what we find at the Oxford Group when we're designing new programs with clients, the leadership development programs lands really, really well when it's designed and aligned with business goals and objectives. That's where organizations are seeing probably 12 times stronger results if they are aligning their business objectives with their leadership strategy. And the Oxford Group, I'll talk a little bit about what we do in a second, but I think we're also signaling a deeper evolution as well. So emotional intelligence amongst our leaders is rising to the top. So AI will shape the role of leaders, but requiring sharper judgment, adaptability, and purpose. So for me, there's a real call to action for leaders to have braver, fiercer conversations with their teams, leaning into difficult conversations to try and increase employee engagement and to boost high-performing teams. So for me, this is a real bold pivot towards what we would describe here as transformational leadership. So it's not just about empowering people. It's not just about managing process. It really is about leaning into those difficult conversations and empowering teams to be their best that they actually can be in those environments. So that's all I wanted to share with you so far. I'm hoping I've provoked some real interesting comments and questions. So I'll hand back to you, Joe, now for the City and Guilds update.
Thanks, Paula. That was great. I really love the braver conversations. I think that's a really, really powerful message. If anybody's got any comments or questions, just a reminder, please do put them into the chat and we'll get to them at the second half of the session. I just wanted to introduce a little bit about who we are. This might be the first time you've joined one of our events, or you might be here every month, and welcome either way. You're probably familiar with the brand City and Guilds. You might have seen it around. We've been around for 150 years, but you might not know everything that we actually do for learning and development teams within employers. As I said, over 145 years, we were born out of the Guilds of London. We're a charity delivering on a purpose, and that purpose is all about enabling people to access the skills they need to thrive in their careers. We're very passionate about our purpose and we measure our impact. You can see some of the stats here from the 2024 impact report. So every year we produce an impact report on the impact that we have on society as a whole, a £15.3 billion impact. And you can see some of the other stats there that we're really proud of. Our impact on green skills. We do a lot in the prison population to reduce reoffending, and we've got great results on getting people into work and helping people progress through work. Commercially, we offer kind of global skills solutions for employers. So obviously we do a lot of work with colleges and training providers, and we sell qualifications, but actually we do a whole lot more within my team, working with learning and development leaders on training and skills benchmarking. We do dual branded certification. We can help develop content. We can help form assessment strategies and quality assurance strategies. We have a consultancy offer that can really take on most skills challenges. We offer global accreditation services, and we're working with clients to help develop skills frameworks for their organizations to enable that progression. So just a real snapshot in some of the things that you might not be aware that we do. The kind of challenges that generally people come to us with are around low employee engagement in training, which leads to poor productivity, high competition for not only high competition in terms of the commercial aspect, but competition for staff, how to retain those staff. And really issues with implementing a really standardized and consistent skills experience for staff across the board. So there's some of the key areas that we tend to work on projects with. Here's some of the people that we work with. You can see there's a range of different sectors. Just a point to note that you can see both the City and Guilds and the ILM brand on display here. In really simple terms, if the project is leadership, management, coaching, or mentoring focused, then it will be branded as ILM. If it's any other skill area, then it will be branded as City and Guilds. And these are all programs that we've accredited with our clients, and just a few examples. So that's a real brief overview of what City and Guilds do in my team. And if you've got any questions on that, or you'd like to contact me, then I'll make my contact details available after the session. Paula's going to talk a little bit about the Oxford Group specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So just a little bit about what we do here at the Oxford Group. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Joe. So we've been around for about 35 years. We are part of the City and Guilds, and we focus on leadership development specifically, and we really choose to focus on how leaders show up day to day, because we think that really does shape organizations and the overall employee experience. We're a global business. We specialize in leadership development, management capability, and talent management. and we deliver our programs either in person, virtual, or blended. And if you just go to the next slide, Joe, I just wanted to focus on the 4 key pillars. So when we speak to clients, and all of the clients that we're working with, we tend to focus around these specific areas of leadership development. Whether it's your first time into management, your first step into management, we can build out programs for those first line management skills. And we kind of can do it in a bespoke way where we align our your goals to our to the design of the program, or we have a range of off the shelf or ready to run programs as well. We do a lot in the talent management space. So this is supporting clients with their sort of high potential population, really helping to build the next generation of leaders through very focused talent management programs. And we operate really nicely as well in the transformational leadership space as well. So this is around supporting ExCo, C-suite level with very bespoke programs, because we believe that when you're trying to instill a set of leadership behaviors and competencies, then that needs to be really role modeled at the very, very top level. So we tend to look at things like masterclass sessions. We're running some really good stuff around emotional capital, which I talked about earlier, which is around building human-centered leadership capability and strengthening that. And underpinning all of this is coaching. We also believe in the democratization of coaching, and everybody in a business where they are an individual contributor or a manager should be able to access coaching to really enhance performance. So we do a lot in that space as well. So that's us. And if, again, as Joe said, if you need any more information about what we do, then obviously feel free to get in touch.
Thanks, Paula. Fantastic. Right. So, I mean, that's kind of enough about City and Guilds, and we're moving on to the leadership development stories from our panel. Just a reminder, please do put any comments and questions into the section. Paula's going to be keeping an eye on questions coming through, and we've got some allocated time for those after we've heard from our panelists. So, just move the slide on. And just a reminder, can you go on mute, please? And if I'd like to invite Dan and Michaela to turn cameras on, if that's okay. And yeah, so I'm going to introduce our panelists. So we have Daniel Brooks, who's the People Development Lead at JD Group. He's worked in learning and development for 11 years, and for the past 4 has been working at JD Group as People Development Lead. He's got a passion for leadership development, supporting colleagues to meet their full potential and empowering high-performing teams. And his time at JD has seen him embracing these and spearheading the design and implementation of their leadership competencies. We'll hear a little bit about that in a moment. And programs powering the group's future leaders and international growth. So we're going to hear a little bit from Dan talking about that very shortly. We've also got Michaela Beecham, who is the head of learning and development at Sperry Marine, a global provider of navigation, communication, and automation systems for commercial and naval marine markets. So prior to this, she worked at Openreach, which you may know is part of the BT Group, as a people development manager, where she discovered her passion for supporting personal and professional growth in employees. So 2 quite diverse brands, I think you'll agree, which is intentional. We really want to give a spectrum, and reflecting on some of the points that Paula made, leadership and development is changing regardless of what sector you operate in. So hopefully some really good insights to be shared. So I'd like to hand over to Dan to talk a little bit about what's been going on at JD. Over to you, Dan.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Joe, for that lovely warm welcome. This is something that I'm really keen to talk on. As Joe mentioned in my introduction, leadership development, it's one of those passions that I have, and that's fueled by my first memories at work, really, which unfortunately were overshadowed by the presence and impact of what that poor management and that poor leadership really looks like. And that marred what should have been those first exciting steps into the world of work, what should have been really building me up to be successful in my career. And that's why ever since starting my career in L&D way back at Lush, I've been absolutely captivated with that challenge of supporting leaders to inspire their teams, to transform what leadership means for them in their areas, and to drive that potential to create the maximum impact, to inspire people, to bring people along on a journey. And by doing that, create a team of people that are not just high performing, but actually I'll feel looked after, feel catered to, and feel like they belong in the place that they work. And I think let's fast forward a little bit. I want to share with you my time at JD in particular, because we've been in a little bit of an incubator as we've gone through this transformation journey. JD is a company that has grown a lot very, very quickly. And because of that, the infrastructure to support the teams was often on the back burner. When joining JD almost 4 years ago, some of the challenges that we faced were a dispersed workforce spread across 3 different head office sites in the UK alone, and then 90,000 colleagues across the globe, those being in retail stores, distribution centres, offices. There was a real lack of any leadership capabilities and alignment across these areas, meaning people were often trained to different standards in different programs, nothing transferred, making internal movement really, really difficult. We also work fast. There's an ever-driven momentum here at JD, which is incredible at chasing those next trends, encouraging development and growth within the organization, and achieving those business goals that are really critical to why we've been so successful. But it had left a lasting impression on our culture, where our teams and our leaders especially had been promoted into positions because they were subject matter experts or technical experts, but with very little time or support for them to get fully to grips with what those new roles were and to adapt themselves. So that meant that great retail colleagues became managers of those stores, but they struggled to be great people leaders. Great buyers and designers of our women's wear were promoted because their work was industry leading, but they struggled to create a cohesive team, pulling in the same direction and creating those brand identities because they'd never had that leadership support. Our property colleagues creating incredible, immersive, award-winning and industry-leading shopping experiences that dominate the high street, but equally dominated their teams and struggled to create a safe culture. And this lack of investment and development meant that we then struggled with things like retention, team morale, leadership and strategic direction was missing because it was never created, never cultivated. And where there was a strategy, leaders failed to fully get their teams on board, pulling in that direction because they didn't know how to do that. They'd never had to do that other than motivating themselves. And that created our challenge. It was really important for us to create pathways that supported colleagues as they prepared and then gained the responsibility of leading our people. So that instead of being thrown in at the deep end, their hand was held through that transition and then beyond it to have real impact as an incredible people leader. But to do that, we first had to sit back and understand not just what makes a great leader, but what makes a great leader at JD. To do that, we aligned it with our group competencies. We created a range of leadership competencies to fit within them based on business strategy and departmental goals. We used metrics like our engagement survey results. We conducted interviews with key stakeholders across the business, sent surveys out to every colleague globally to really understand not just the wider leadership challenges, but the wider challenges faced by our people that leadership was contributing to. And that allowed us to look at what impact we could have on the organization and set some real goals from the start that we then built a full development roadmap to achieve. Our first thing was stepping up. This was our foundational leadership program, targeting leadership essentials such as how you transition from a colleague to a leader, how to delegate effectively, the core skills of leadership, such as leading with empathy. Listening skills are often so fundamentally forgotten about. From there, we put in place our leadership development program. This was an ILM assured course that takes leaders beyond that foundational level to explore topics such as psychological contracting, building effective teams, and so much more. It was actually really interesting to hear from Paula earlier on the importance that she stakes on that emotional leadership, being able to really, really lead with people's feelings, thoughts, and understanding that we have to be diverse and inclusive because we build that into all of our programs. We then also worked on our program called North Star. This is our senior leadership program, and it takes a really bespoke approach with mandatory modules to create a shared leadership approach, but also workshops, action learning sets, and panels based on key topics that come out through gap analysis, 360 feedback, emotional capital reports, so that every single one of our cohorts is bespoke to those leaders going through it and then built to each individual through their coaching as well. And we do this by building those key elements of self-assessment and peer assessment into the beginning and the end of those programs, allowing us to measure the impact. But we know that those programs work. We can evidence it through Kirkpatrick's, through setting some clear objectives, by measuring those engagement survey results, retention data, all of that. But what we wanted to do beyond it was a bit of a culture shift. So beyond our programs, we wanted to create a culture where our leaders are always pushing forward to develop better teams, further their leadership capability, to stay up to date with current trends and to learn from one another. So to do this, we use what we call our leadership labs. And these labs are different every single time. We run them almost every month. And they're an opportunity for our leaders to try something new, to experiment, to get things wrong in what is a really, really safe space. The setup of it changes constantly, and sometimes we'll have guest speakers discussing a new approach to negotiation, for example, and that could be an expert within the business. We've had members of our legal teams that negotiate contracts every single day come in to share their insights with our colleagues, but also externally, getting those hostage negotiators from the police to come in and share their insights. So we have that internal versus internal, and then our leaders discussing what does that mean to them, taking it beyond what should be a one and done discussion to creating some set steps to try out new ways of approaching those conversations. It could be an action learning set pulled together to embed a new way of working around, for example, data-driven decision making, or something as simple as a colleague sharing what their current challenges are within their team and asking for help. And there's nothing more rewarding than seeing those leaders come together to share what works for them, how they might try to tackle it, or to get somebody thinking in a little bit of a different way. And these labs have the added benefit to us as a learning and development team because they often help us to keep our finger on the pulse of the organization, understanding what's working and sometimes what isn't as well. It allows us to create a little bit of that feedback loop so we can really adapt what we're doing to those business needs as and when they're arising. And because of that, it's allowed us to create great results. This year alone, we've had a 4% rise in our leadership metrics and our engagement survey, which over 90,000 colleagues means that's an awful lot of people changing their opinions. So we know that we're having a great impact. And that's where we're up to. It's been absolutely amazing to share a bit of our story with you, the challenges we've faced and where we've come over the past 4 years. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Dan. That was fantastic. So yeah, we're going to move on to Michaela's story next, and then there'll be some time for questions, both from myself and Paula, but also from you guys if anybody's got any questions on there. So thanks a lot for that, Dan. That was a really good.
Thank you so much.
Really good story. So going to invite Michaela to tell us a little bit about her leadership development story. Michaela, when you want the slides moving on, feel free to just give me a nod. I'm
I
trying
will
to.
do.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And that was a great slot, Dan. I was taking notes throughout. I love the leadership lab, so I'm going to nick that one. But yeah, thanks for sharing. So I've been with Sperry Marine for about 10 months now. I was brought on to join as part of a brand new role as head of learning and development, which was a really exciting project to get stuck into because I had the opportunity to build the L&D strategy basically from scratch. That a blank canvas to work from without the usual sort of expectations or premonitions of what the role is. And it's been a fantastic few months. I was just saying to the guys before the call, we're launching our new LMS today, which has been a really big project as well. But I'm now at the point of launching the new leadership development program for senior leaders. So the timing of this webinar was perfect because I've been in that stage of creating it and working out what works best for us as a company. And so I thought my focus for my slot today, I'd talk through that process of creating a leadership program and how to make a bit of an impact in your own organization. So if you move on, Joe, to the next slide. Thank you. So the first thing to do then is to set out what your vision and mission is. And this is like a really key planning stage for your leadership development program because it helps you get the buy-in that is really important from your executive team or anyone who's sponsoring the program. And basically it helps you outline what your end goal is. So for us at Sperry Marine, that was to develop high potential leaders across different levels of the business to support retention and succession using experiential and accessible learning tools. And then the mission is like the broken down goals underneath that you need to achieve in order for us to be able to achieve that vision, sorry. So the mission involves things like discovering individual aspirations and readiness to progress. Some of you may have heard of like strengthen, stretch or move. We use these as a really helpful category to make us understand what point of their journey that the individuals are who are applying for the program. So strengthen being developing in the current role, stretch being new and broader challenges within role, or move is laterally or a promotion, so moving into a different role. Which really helps you identify what kind of the pool of people it is that you're working with and who would be most suitable for your program. Our next step would be identifying the cohort of high potential leaders. I'll be going into this in a bit more detail because it's very complicated. And then enhancing the skills, abilities and confidence of our people. So that's all around like the shift of the culture to one that's of continuous learning. And then finally building a pipeline of capable leaders. So this is all very well, but how do we actually go about doing this? So yeah, the next slide, the process then. So this is the way that I've designed our process, and I think the order of it is really important. So I quite often see people agreeing the success measures at a later date once they've already planned out the program, but it's really useful to get your success measures in right from the outset, as it would then affect the decisions that you make throughout the rest of your design phase. I think everyone who is in L&D who's on this call will probably agree with how difficult it can be to decide on KPIs for what we do. It's very different to things like finance or sales, where they have quite tangible measures of what success looks like. But there are things that we can look at. For example, the employee engagement surveys, they quite often have a career development section. Include it as part of that. Internal promotion rates, for us, the succession planning is really important. So that's something that we will be looking at more long term. Retention rates as well. Make sure that when you're doing, when employees leave the business, you're doing those exit surveys so you can pick up on the reasons why people are leaving and is it to do with the progression. And then NPS and feedback scores. But I also think it's worthwhile doing a comparative view of like a 360 before the program and at the end of the program as well. So you can see whether the people who work closely with your cohort are ones that they believe that their leadership traits have improved or not, or even just doing leadership assessments where you can do self-ratings. I've used those in the past and they're quite useful to look at as well. Next up, the comms plan and timeline. This just gives you something that is really useful to work towards, just as much as it is useful for everyone else to know what the plan is. And I have had to learn to be less precious about the dates that we set because things change all the time from different external factors. So for example, if you've got key sponsors that you want to be involved as part of the program, those dates might change depending on when sponsors are available. And at the moment, we're finding high leave periods as well. So allow for some flexibility. That's one that I've definitely learned over the past few months. Third up, identifying your candidates. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the high potentials on the next slide, so I'll hold off of that one in the moment. And then the diagnostic phase. So there's a couple of people from my business on the call here, and they will know, anyone who works with me will know that I bang on about this diagnostic phase so often. But I think it's just crucial in knowing that you get the right people and the right skills on your program, because there's no point in you developing a leadership program for people who have already excelling in the skills that you choose. So the idea of the diagnostic is then to not only get to know your cohort, because you've already identified the candidates at this stage, finding out where their strengths and weaknesses are, but also by doing your research too. So think about like what Paula was talking about earlier, with the fact that we have such a low percentage, I think it was like 36%, Paula, for the leadership programs that are future ready. So don't let yours be one of them. It's worth having a look at the skills trends reports that are out there. There's so much online. Have a think about what will equip your leaders in the future, not just for today. And then finally, the program rollout. So we all know the importance of blended learning. So start off with supporting your people with putting together a PDP, creating a plan that is like individual to them. Identify the opportunities for hands-on experience, the leadership labs that Dan was talking about. Offer a mentoring opportunities that gives them a diverse perspective, and also think about tailoring resources and platforms as well. Like the actual workshops or the events should only be one very small part of the puzzle of your whole program in total. If you click on one, and then finally, that like, so what now kind of thing that you need to ask yourself at the end of the program. So they've gone through all of this and they've had so much investment into their learning. What are you going to do now to keep that motivation and learning alive once the program has ended? Because so often employees who go on these programs, they sort of expect to have a promotion at the end of it, but quite often there isn't any roles that are available. Have you addressed that with the group? Is there other things that we can be doing to help keep that learning alive where there isn't necessarily a vacancy for them to move into? If you move on, the identifying candidates, I wanted to hone in on this a little bit more because of how important it is, but also how complex it can be to choose the right people for your program. So I recently went to a CRF conference on assessing potential, which I'm sure some of you are at as well, because they're very popular in the L&D community. But so if anyone who did attend the conference will recognize the integrated model of potential on the right-hand side. Feel free to use that. There's loads of research on the CRF website about it. But it's just all about identifying what high potential is and what high potential means to your organization, because it can be very different depending on who your organization are, where you are at in your company strategy. And it's that age-old question of like, potential for what? And then that answer to that question should then align with your vision. So it all kind of plays a part in one another. So for us, I was talking about the vision for us being about that succession planning. So that's what we're focusing on. And then you can see on the right hand side there, what I've done is color coded the model of potential by different areas, because when you're identifying candidates for your program, it shouldn't just be one simple tool used, because a lot of these tools can be very subjective, whereas we want to identify people who are not only high potential now, but who will be in the future. So you need to think about different tools that you can use to help try and make that process as fair and just as possible. So the way that we've gone about it is that we have that online assessment. We use SHL for us. There are so many different platforms available offering a similar sort of thing. So you can see there on the diagram what sorts of parts of the potential model fit under that potential assessment, and that will give us that objective view of where that person currently is in their career and where they'll be suited to be going in the future as well. There's also the observation part of it. So that's usually manager observation on the job. And then also looking at things like annual and mid-year reviews for that discussion part of it. So our managers having the career conversations with our individuals and have these individuals express the want to progress, and they're at that point where they're ready for that next step up. So there's lots of different things to consider here, but something that is worth spending the most amount of time on is thinking about how you are going to identify your individuals, because that will make or break your program of making sure you get the right people at the right time. So that is all for me on my side of where we're at the moment. We are going into our diagnostic phase now. So yeah, so thank you for letting me share that.
Thanks, Michaela. Some great stuff in there. And we'll be coming back to Dan and Michaela now for a few questions. So there's a few questions that I'm going to ask the panel to draw out some more of that great insight, and then we'll move on to the audience Q&A. So please do keep those questions coming. Starting with you then, Dan, you mentioned a few times during your session about being a global organization and having a global approach. So how do you take a program that might kind of work in the UK or work in England and scale that approach globally? Is there any kind of top tips around that?
Yeah, and you know what? There's no easy way to do it. There isn't a cheat sheet that you can kind of roll out to do that, and it's gonna be very dependent on the organization you're in. But a few things that work for us that I always like to keep in mind is stakeholder co-creation, partnering with local teams in each market area to understand what are the unique cultural and operational needs before you design or launch any program there. A lot of the times people say, well, we'll just move it over, see how it goes, and then make the changes afterwards. And then people feel like you're doing that sheep dip approach and it doesn't land well. And you only get a chance to launch that once. You don't want it to get a bad name. So definitely that collaborative process ensures that it's relevant, you've got buy-in. Running pilots and using a bit of an iterative approach. So instead of imposing that one size fits all, like I said, we pilot initiatives in smaller groups to capture feedback, adapt further, and then start to scale. That for us, we've found promotes higher engagement, but also means that there's that bigger contextual fit with that area. So when Paula was talking about, curating leadership programs to fit the demographic that they're going to make sure that they're built into the day-to-day lives of the people that are the leaders on the ground, it allows us to do that and ensure that there is that consistency. Framework consistency is the third. So anchoring the programs around core leadership competencies enables that standard of excellence. It supports our global mobility while we're still allowing the content and the delivery to reflect those local realities as well. And then the last one, which I guess everybody will do already, but it's that feedback loop, continuous feedback via interviews, learning checks, running things like those leadership labs. It makes sure that what we offer evolves in response to the shifting challenges faced by the leaders in each region. And they might change at different paces because Spain's a faster growing market than the UK. We're much more established here, but that's fine because then what the UK can do is look at what Spain doing really well and bring it the other way.
Yeah,
So I
I like
think
that.
those four are probably the four that I'd say are the most important for us.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. Over to you, Michaela. You spent a lot of time there talking about the identification of candidates and potential and people that are going to be part of these programs. Well, what about the people that aren't chosen for those programs? How do you keep them motivated and engaged? Is there a way to do that, without them feeling left behind?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because it's fantastic that we're investing and talking about leadership development, but we mustn't forget the pool of people who are clearly keen to develop and progress but haven't been selected. When I worked at Openreach, I ran the climb program for aspiring leaders. I do recognize the name of someone on the call who I think might have been on one of my cohorts. It might be a coincidence, but yeah, so it was an amazing part of my career. Loved the climb program, but it quickly became a bit of a disgruntlement because a lot of people saw this fantastic opportunity, but then if they didn't get on it, it turned things a little bit sour. So that's when I then learned from that and then created what I call Climb Light. So that was like a condensed version of the main Climb program, which didn't have a selection criteria to get on, so anyone could get on it. We recommended it to those who didn't get on the main program, and the uptake was just incredible, and a lot of the content that we covered helped then equip these individuals to apply next year and be successful. And so in the following years of Climb, we had some amazing success stories of people who had that knockback first time, but they'd still had the investment and development to then go on and be successful on the main program in the future. I am aware that takes a lot of time and commitment, and we don't have to go to those extremes every time, but there are plenty of other ways to keep people motivated. So like Dan was saying, that initial feedback stage is also so important. So whether it's you or the line manager or the senior manager, have you sat down with your individual and gone through the feedback of why they weren't successful, but not focusing so much on that, but looking instead at like the focus for the future. So thinking, okay, you aren't the right fit right now, but what can we do to help get you there? What steps need to be taken to support you to get you where you want to be? And that's when you can have a little look at what like practical opportunities, whether there's projects or exposure to the right people to help gain that experience to be successful in the future. But it is so crucial, because that's when you find that you have that issue of people leaving because they just get disheartened. So it makes sure that you invest in those people just as much.
And in a way, it's kind of a good problem to have if you've got a lot of people that are really super engaged and really want to be part of the program. I think often we speak to people whose staff often feel like hostages sometimes when they've been forced to go on training programs, and I'd rather be just doing my job. And if you've got people that are really kind of keen to develop themselves, that's a good situation.
I think if I can just add to that as well, Joe, if I may, just picking up on
go for
point there. So, Michaela, I think you were kind of I think you're familiar with the 5 Conversations program that we run. And Conversation 5 is around career conversations. So every manager should be having regular career conversations with their team in terms of where they want to go, whether it's a lateral move, whether it's so it's not always about promotions, not always about getting on the next talent program. It's about where they want to be and how they can really develop their skills. So if that Conversation 5 is happening regularly, then potentially you shouldn't really get that level of disgruntlement. And it feels like that's what you're doing in your organization. So that's great.
We ran a performance management program earlier in the year for our managers to help them get more consistent in performance management. And a big part of that was the career conversations part. And specifically helping managers to have conversations where people are feeling, oh, there's no room for me to progress or move on. How are you keeping your team motivated when there isn't a vacancy and all those sorts of things? So
brilliant.
Fantastic. Just conscious of time and want to leave time for audience questions, but I would like to get through another couple of questions. So I wonder if we can try and keep answers more a bit quite concise. I think there's been great expansive kind of stories here. Dan, I think it's probably a big question, so difficult to answer concisely, but it's a hot topic, and it's one that Paula mentioned in her intro about artificial intelligence. I know that from our conversations previously that you have been utilising emerging kind of AI technologies to support leadership development. It's a really hot topic. Can you just give us any kind of key insights into how that's working? I know it's not the be all and end all, and we've talked a lot about emotional and empathy and empathetic leadership, which maybe is in competition with AI. But if you've got anything to share about how you're using it, that'd be great.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say that, because what we try to do with it is actually make sure that it's advancing that emotional leadership and boosting that awareness. So we've been working with a company called Bravin, who have trained these AI agents in coaching, conduct, ethics, practice. And it's really important that when you're choosing a solution, they've got all of that integrated, and it's not just ChatGPT, because you're not getting the same response. But by working with them, what we've been able to do is offer not just leaders, but colleagues across the business access to coaching on demand for any topic that they want. And what we've been able to do with that is free up time for our team to then look at what's coming off the back of those, completely anonymized, which again brings us in that full loop to how we create the programs off the back of it. We also use AI avatars as a way to practice difficult conversations and other role play options. By giving an avatar feedback, if they do it wrong, nobody's feelings are hurt. There's no repercussions from it. So probably those 2 fundamental ways, the AI coaching, which has been fantastic, and then creating a safe environment for them to practice and give feedback. And we do that in a lot of our leadership labs after we've learned a new skill. we'll do a 30-minute wrap up of let's put it into practice, and we'll get the AI avatar up on the screen. They'll take turns doing it. They'll dip in and out. They'll ask someone to take the hot seat when it gets a little bit too hot for them. And it's been great to see them helping one another tackle that situation as well. So
Yeah.
I think it can actually contribute towards those leadership skills that we often assume AI distracts us from.
Yeah, really interesting point. And like I say, it's freeing up more time to focus in where the humans can kind of lead the way. You're freeing up
Exactly.
and allowing that safe space to practice.
Yeah.
Michaela, probably kind of a last question from me to you. Have you got any advice for learning and development teams who are really wanting to invest in people's development and listening to these stories and kind of wishing that they could do all this, but are maybe restricted by budgets and cost saving? Are there any kind of key things that you would suggest or advise?
Yeah, I could completely resonate with this question. I feel like I'm always battling the thing with budgets. But the three things that spring to mind are, firstly, like we've mentioned about like utilizing like expertise within the business. You've got people in your business who may have either been through a leadership program, or those leaders who spring to mind when you think of someone who really embodies the company's values and behaviors, who you think would be a good role model. Use those people to bring into running a workshop, being a guest speaker, or they could even be sponsors of different projects. Like, it's good for their development too, so use people that you've got internally. I've found to be very effective in the past. Secondly, if you are using external facilitators or consultants, work with them to create the content. It brings down the cost massively by splitting the load between the two of you, and it also then means you're more involved in the content creation and the decision of what gets put into the program. So that's a good one to bring down the cost. And then finally, I know a lot of companies have this like apprenticeship levy. So you usually know if you've got the apprenticeship levy because you're a large employer that has more than, I think it's about 3 million in the pay bill.
Exactly, yeah, that's right.
But it's recently changed to not being the apprenticeship levy. They've called it like the growth and skills levy, which kind of reflects more that it's way more flexible now of what you could use it for. And so now 50% of the funding that comes through the government for the apprenticeship levy can now be used for non-apprenticeship training, which opens up all this different training that you can use for things that you ordinarily wouldn't have been able to. The only caveat is that you have to commit to a certain amount of hours per week for that individual to have like off the job training. But it's a really good way for you to invest in the training for your individuals without having it having to come out of your own budget. So do look at that if that's something that your company has but you don't yet utilize, because now that the rules have changed as of this financial year, it is a lot more accessible and they're adding to it every day. So do have a little look at that one. It's quite interesting.
Thanks, Michaela. And as I said in my introduction, if anybody on this call or any of your colleagues have got any questions about skills training, what's available, then we've got some great expertise around our organisation that we can advise on that as well. Paula, are there any comments or questions in the chat? I can't see it because I haven't got the
So there are no questions as such, but there have been a couple of comments around some specific topics. So Dan, I think to your point where you were talking about the returning on investment and demonstrating that behavioural change, there's been a couple of comments in there around the importance of getting stakeholder buy-in so they can really observe that behaviour change as opposed to just looking at the numbers. So that's an interesting one. And then Andrea has commented around the importance of emotional intelligence and how that comes into play. And I think we've all talked about that in terms of human-centered leadership. And then I've just posed the question actually because I'm really interested to hear about how people are using the redefined or the repurposed levy, whether people are using it in different ways opposed to just apprenticeships. I feel quite out of touch with the apprenticeship levy since I've moved over to the Oxford Group. So if anyone wants to share, what kind of skills you can fund, that'd be quite interesting.
And if anybody has any other questions or comments, we've got a few minutes now before we wrap up. So now's the time to get the questions in for the panel. Just to reassure everybody, the slides and the full recording will be shared with everybody that signed up for the session. So you will get that. And happy to kind of pass any other questions on following the session as well. But hopefully a lot of the, it's been a wide-ranging discussion. So yeah, please do either kind of raise your hand or type any questions in, and we'll come to them.
Actually, Abby's just sent in a question, which I think is highly pertinent. So, great session, Michaela and Daniel. We struggle with diversity in our key leadership roles. Do you actively try and support diversity in leadership roles? Quite a nice one to end with, I think.
Anybody want to take that?
I can do, yeah. So we've worked with our DE&I business partner to ensure that we're removing as many barriers as possible when it comes to putting yourself onto those leadership programs. So it was really interesting to see Michaela's really structured approach to how people become eligible for those, because ours are a bit of an open forum. You put yourself forward for it, and as long as you meet minimum criteria such as having direct reports for the leadership one and so on, you get on there. But our DEI business partner was really keen for us to do that, to try and prevent any hurdles or bias from managers that are nominating colleagues towards that. And we also run an internal program called Maximising Your Potential. This is particularly aimed at the organisation's goal to get a 50-50 split of female leaders at that more senior level. So the program specifically looks at the challenges that women face in their careers, how to overcome them, and then we use that with executive coaching. We have some executive sponsors within the business and some mentors to ensure that we're doing that. And we're seeing the percentage creep up slowly. It's only in its second year now, but the feedback's incredible, and it's allowing us to just make a little bit of an impact where previously we'd struggled.
Thanks, Dan. Anything to add to the diversity topic, Michaela?
I just think it's important to have people in the leadership program who are representative, and there's like a diverse group, so that future cohorts, you've got to think about that future of like encouraging other people later down the line to apply. And so if you always have the same people who are on the program, it doesn't encourage an individual to be like, oh, maybe I'm the right kind of person for it. So it's just thinking about making sure that you have got a diverse group, so that in the future you encourage other people to do the same.
Absolutely. Anything else on the chat, Paula?
Yeah, there's just one last comment from William. He's talking about any tips on breaking through the on breaking through or cracking a human-centered approach in terms of leadership. I think William's working for an organisation where there's still old models in play there. So what can we do to try and break through that? And what I've just suggested is I'd probably start with a self-awareness 360 tool on assessing emotional capital with your leaders. So which is fairly inexpensive tool.
Yeah, it sounds like something the Oxford Group would certainly help with as well.
Yeah, well, that was a segue, but I didn't want to.
Well, I'll do it for you. Okay, we're gonna wrap up there. So just the final bit. Excuse me. So, I mean, this event is kind of part of what we call our employer community. It's one of these every month. Sometimes they're in person. We do London, Wakefield, Manchester. Different topics, some leadership topics, some will be more about apprenticeship, some might be more about measuring return on investment in training. So, please do keep engaging with this. I send out a monthly newsletter if you'd like to get that. My email address is on this slide. Please let me know, and I'll make sure you're in the loop with all our kind of announcements, things coming up. We've also got our next event. So we're having a break for August because, everybody else is having a break in August. But we are back on the 10th of September for our next online forum, which is Reclaiming Leadership. So another leadership one, time to pause, reflect and reset. A lot of that will be around our book that you can see there in the top corner, The Neglected Acts of Leadership. So if you want to know more about that, please get in touch with Paula and myself. You can buy it on Amazon. It's been a bestseller, Paula, has it? I think
it's a bestseller. Yeah, you can still get it on Amazon.
It's a fantastic book about leadership and how music can help you rediscover the neglected acts of leadership. So if that title doesn't intrigue you, then I don't know what will. But then from September onwards, we're going to have an event, at least one every month on different topics. We also have a podcast series, and you can click the link in the slides to do that. And then please do get in touch with me with any questions. Also, if you think that you have insights to share and stories to tell, and you would like to be a panelist on one of the future webinars or suggest a topic, Dan and Michaela have given up their time really kindly today, and hopefully we've got other people that would like to have a platform to talk about the great work that they're doing. So please do get in touch, because we're trying to do one of these every month, and that takes a lot of insight from our community. So that's it. So we'll get you some follow-up emails, probably within a week. You'll have the slides, the recording, and any other useful bits from us.